Hey there everyone. So I, like last year, decided to watch every single film that was nominated for an Oscar. And today I'm going to be ranking every single film that was nominated for an Oscar. Yeah, this was a little tough to get through, but I did it last year and I tried to do it in previous years as well, and I really wanted to complete it again, and maybe this will be like an annual thing that I do every year. Now, how we're going to structure this video is, last time I did the shorts first, but I think people aren't as interested in the short, so I think I'm going to start with the features first, and then we'll get to the shorts later. We'll do that at the end of the video. This is going to be a long-ass video, either way, so yeah, I'll try and do some timestamps to make it easier. And at the end of the video, after we've done the shorts, I'm going to go through each award and which award I think is going to win, and which award I think should win, or which film should win said award. So yeah, let's get into it with the worst feature film of the Oscars, and that is, in my opinion, Emilia Perez. Emilia Perez. When I first watched this film, I thought this probably won't be the bottom film. Like, I won't rank this at the bottom. There's probably going to be something worse. But there really wasn't. This film was kind of dreadful in many ways. Now, there's a million controversies surrounding this film, and we can get into all of them if you want, but there's probably too many to count. First off, you of course have the fact that this was made by a bunch of French people, and it wasn't really shot in Mexico, and its depictions of Mexico are apparently very stereotypical, very offensive, and, you know, a lack of care, a lack of authenticity. And that, I think, is a problem. When you can be French and write something in Mexico, that's cool, but like when you don't have an authentic story to tell, it does feel, you know, well, it becomes offensive, but also it's just like a lack of care, you know, a lack of creativity, and I think just not good, not very good. Now, also, you obviously have the whole idea of the transness in this film. Of course, the character played by Gascon is not a great representation of trans people, because this awful, dreadful, you know, fucking cartel boss who's murdered people, and then she just gets this out, I guess, by transitioning into a woman, and then we just say, it's okay. Now she feels bad. Now she has she's doing charities and stuff to look for victims of the cartel, and it's like, wait, no, that's not how transness works. You don't just become a new person and lose all the crimes you committed in the past. Like, that's not what happens. And then Gascon is an actress as well, like, is dreadful as a person. You know, she's apparently, like, all these like racist things she said, and oh god, she should not get the nomination. Not even just based on her as a person, but also based on the fact that I you know, like, her performance was fine at parts and was actually decent and really good in parts, especially the last 10 minutes. But like, she wasn't even able to sing. Like, and this is a musical. And getting onto the musical side of this film, it was completely pointless. All the songs are dreadful. Some of them are actually, like, really, like, laughable when they're not meant to be. Like, especially the Penis Vagina song. That was something, and was not really well written or composed. And a lot of these songs rip away from the film. Tonally, this film is a mess. It is the definition of that Family Guy meme. It insists upon itself. That I saw someone say that. I can't take credit for it. I saw someone else leave that comment on a review, and yeah, I have to agree. This film generally does feel very artsy for the sake of it, and not in a good way. And overall, was dreadful. Although I did like aspects of it. Don't get me wrong. There were certain parts that I thought were pretty good. Like I said, the last 10 minutes I quite liked. But that's about it. It's definitely the worst film of the bunch, and the fact that this has the most nominations, I think, is awful and laughable, and the Academy probably should be ashamed that they decided to go with this film, and I don't even know why. Like, was it just to be virtue signally? Was it just to be like, oh, look how progressive and cool we are, we're nominating this film that's got a trans person in it? Because I think there's probably better stories to be told from trans people. This was not not a great story for the transers. Okay, so that's Emilia Perez right at the bottom. The 688. So I just want to say again, not a dreadful film. One of my least favourite ones, though, for a few reasons. Now, I do think the story that was told, the story about the 688 unit, these black women who are, of course, tasked with delivering the mail, I'd never known about that. I was never taught about that. So I think that story is definitely interesting, and I'm glad I now know more about it. But everything about this film felt like a cliche. It was a cliche on like racial justice films, and you see every single beat coming a mile away, and they did nothing new with it. And it's a cliche on like war films too. It's every cliche under the book. I think some of the acting was pretty like subpar at times too. Not a brilliant film. I definitely liked it. I enjoyed it overall. I thought it was good. I think they could have halved like 20 minutes for the film though. Some of it, felt a little long. Some of the scenes were a bit dragged out. And I do feel like the main character we flip-flopped a little too much there. Like you had the main sort of woman, the commander or whatever, the woman who's in charge of the unit. You have her, and then you have this other girl who obviously has her boyfriend, or the Jewish guy that she was in love with. And then he dies, and his death felt a bit abrupt and out of nowhere. It kind of hits you, but it doesn't really hit you like it probably should have. Like I didn't feel anything. I was like, oh, okay, he's dead, I guess. Cool, let's move on. So that's my point. And then I get it does feel like they're trying to hit the history beats a little bit too much too. Like it does feel like a lecture at times, and less like a film where we can really get with these characters. But I still liked a lot about it, so I'll give it a thumbs up. Still a good film, but the second worst in my opinion, the 688. Inside Out 2. Okay, this is the third worst film, and this seems to be a controversial take because some people really adore Inside Out 2. Now, I've heard some good things, and I will give it some praise. I think how it depicts a panic attack is pretty good. I liked some of the humor; it was okay. I think some of the new emotions were well developed. Something about the new Pixar films, though. This one wasn't for me overall. My biggest complaint, to be honest, is A, the plot holes. These emotions were not present in the first one, and the idea that when a child goes through puberty, they suddenly gain embarrassment and envy and anxiety is ludicrous. I remember what it was like to be a prepubescent child, okay? I had those emotions. I had anxiety. I had embarrassment. These are things that don't develop, and another problem with the film is the stakes of the film are a hockey game. It's a fucking hockey game, and whether or not she's going to be mates with her friends at the end of the day. Couldn't we do something a bit more nuanced, a bit more, out there? We had to do this, and I think they had something, which was puberty, right? Puberty is one of those really rough times, and to depict it through a hockey game feels a little cheap, right? I kind of would like a little bit more for this. Maybe it could be something deeper with her friendship group. Maybe it could be something deeper with her parents. Maybe she's naive and she goes off with an older boy or something. They could do anything. And I feel like there could have been more risks taken with this film. It feels very safe. It feels like they are riding off the high of the first film. And overall, I wasn't a big fan of it. Still not a bad film. I still think it's good. I just don't think it's great. It's not as bad as Elemental, though, so it's got something. That's Inside Out 2 for you. Elton John, Never Too Late. So I don't know if I'm just a little bit Elton John'd out. I really loved Rocketman back in 2019, I think it was. That was a brilliant film, and I think Elton John as a figure is a really interesting figure. I do. I'm fond of his music. I'm fond of him as a person as well. I do think he is a national treasure to some degree. This documentary was a little boring for me. I didn't rock with it too much. There was some new things we learned about Elton John, but I think a lot of this stuff I knew already. So it just, to me, it didn't bring anything new. No new information about him. And we're following his final tour, and I don't know, it feels a little bit like a I guess like a wank-off session where we're just like, Elton John's last tour, his last good hoorah. I understand why it was nominated for Best Song. It's a decent song, and it does feel like this entire movie's existence was for Elton John to get another Oscar. That's what it kind of feels like. I can't lie, but it's not a terrible documentary. There's some good things in there. There's a few new things I learned, but overall, it felt like I was just going over things I already knew. So I wasn't a huge fan of it. So it goes here. Elton John. Never too late. Porcelain War. So I feel terrible for putting this documentary so low, but my issue with this documentary was it was a bit of a chore to watch. I found it a bit boring at times. I understand what they're trying to do, where we're focusing on the role of art in a war, and we follow mainly this couple who the female in the couple is doing her artsy things, whereas the man is going off and fighting. And there's these weird tonal shifts where we have these really somber, lovely kind of pieces talking about art and the importance of art, and then we're to the war zone, you know, and I don't know, it's kind of like whiplash. There's some lovely animation. I remember there's like one shot of this snail, and they have like all the artsy stuff with the snail. Like, there's some nice visuals in this documentary too. But I found it kind of boring to watch. I can't lie. It was a bit of a burden. And I don't mean to be like, I need war porn. Like, we need to see the battle. Like, 20 Days in Mariupol was like a particularly amazing documentary. Obviously, the guy was just at the right time, right place, right time, and he took a lot of risks. And that entire documentary, he could have been killed during the making of. And I'm not trying to say that had to be this, but maybe it just presented in a better way. I just feel like the documentary was so long. It didn't even have a long run time, but I really felt it. It was a struggle to get through. And it's not even like a Ukraine thing. I'm not some stooge accepting money from the Russian government. I'm full-fledged support of Ukraine's right to exist. Not to get too political, but anyone who's not, I generally don't understand. You've been hoodwinked by the Russian government and seek help. But yeah. It's not even about that. I just found it kind of boring, so there you go. Porcelain War. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Now, I've already forgot most of the story. There's an ape. He's attacked. He goes on a little mission. He finds a little human girl. He befriends her. The orangutan dies. And then there's some like technology or some shit, and they have to go get it. The story's lost on me. Now, I've watched most of the Planet of the Apes films. I haven't seen the one where Caesar dies, so whatever. But I know that happens, I guess. It's fine. It's a Planet of the Apes film. What do you expect? It goes here. Planet of the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes of the Apes of the Apes. A Real Pain. So this is a Jesse Eisenberg film, and it's kind of like a black comedy, I suppose. Now, the reason why I'm ranking it so low is it felt like there was something seriously interesting here, and I think like a deep character exploration between these two cousins who obviously go on this trip to visit, the sort of Holocaust sites and also their grandmother's home. It just felt terribly miscast. Maybe it's just me, because I've seen a lot of people really like this film, but I just couldn't get into the characters. They just didn't feel believable to me. I think because of the two leads, especially Jesse Eisenberg. I think Jesse Eisenberg really tore me out this film. Maybe if it wasn't him who was playing the main character and he was simply just directing it and he wrote it and that was it, then maybe I could buy this film a bit more. Maybe I could gel with it a bit more, but I don't know, something about his performance kind of pulled me out. At times, this film was very somber and felt very real, and there was some really great moments. And then other times, it felt like it was trying to do slapstick comedy. And that's what really tore me from this film, was just a bit of a tonal shift, I felt. It just didn't grip me as much as it has some people, but if you enjoyed it, that's fair. I understand why. Just not for me, mainly because of the two leads. So, there you go, A Real Pain. Maria. Now, I will say this film was probably not made for me. Not particularly a subject I'm that interested in, although I did find parts of the film very entertaining. It did get me in the last hour. I think I was finally invested in it, but it took me a while to really get into it. But I did like the sort of last hour of the film, especially the sort of scenes leading up to her death and the decision of whether or not she should go out there and sing. And I think that last moment where she sings her last song and then just sort of collapses and dies, I found that scene particularly like really moving. Now, everything else, the sort of first half of the film, was a bit of a slog, and that's all it really comes down to. I do feel like it felt a bit pretentious at times as well, but aside from that, it wasn't terrible. So it goes here, Maria. Flow. Now, part of me feels terrible for putting flow this low, because I really love the story behind this film and how these people made it. Now, this entire film is made in open source software. It's just a cute little film about a cat and a capybara in a boat after a big storm, and that's really all it is. But that's kind of it, though. That's my problem. Is it's cute, and I really like the story behind it, and I think it's beautiful and really well made, but compared to like the other films, I just can't put it any higher. I don't feel right putting it any higher, because there was no substance, there was no story here. It was just a really cute, like low budget, open source animated film, and everything about that is awesome. Obviously it's a Latvian film as well, so this is nominated for Best International Feature too, which is pretty awesome to see. I have nothing but encouragement for the filmmakers behind this, and I think the fact that films can be made with like open source software and stuff like that is awesome, and I wish one day I could do something like that. And yeah, it was cute. I loved it. I really did love it, but it just I just don't feel right putting it any higher, so that's why it's here. Flow. Wicked. Now, I just want to preface, musicals are not for me, and I went into this film with fairly low expectations, and I think my expectations were exceeded. And that might be because I went in there with low expectations. But either or, I enjoyed this film a lot more than I thought I would. And I liked the story overall. I found some of it really good. A lot of the visual effects was brilliant. All the costumes, the makeup design, the effects, how it looked was all excellent. Some of the acting I thought was really good at times, and then others I thought was a bit off the mark. The songs I thought were, for the most part, good. The opening song I hated, though. That was auto-tuned to shit, to the point where I just could not understand what they were saying. And unfortunately, I watched this in cinema, so I had no subtitles. So I had no idea what the hell they were singing about. Apparently, auto-tune wasn't used, but I just, whatever they did, however they mixed it, in whatever way they used, they made it so it was, I just couldn't understand it. Now, I've never seen the stage play before, so I've gone into this story completely blind, not knowing much about it really, aside from we followed the Wicked Witch of the West before she became the Wicked Witch of the West. And that's all I knew. And yeah, there were some surprising twists and turns, but the ending does feel very abrupt because, of course, this is Hollywood. It's the modern day. We have to split films into two, so yeah. And also, what's his name? Oh, God. Jurassic Park man. Jeff Goldblum. I like Jeff Goldblum in the film, too. So, maybe not as high as it would be for other people, but again, it's one of those films where if you would put it higher, I have no objections to that. It's just not for me. It's not my type of film, but there you are. Wicked. Better Man. Now, before I watched this film, I thought, Jesus Christ, this is a Robbie Williams biopic. There was absolutely no way this is going to not be on the bottom. It's going to be in the bottom 5 for sure. And I went in there with low expectations, again, just like with Wicked. So maybe this is something to do with it. I really loved aspects of this film. Now, the gimmick of him being a chimpanzee throughout the entire film is a little silly at times and looks dreadful at times. I think some of the special effects are kind of bad and kind of wonky. And I don't think this film deserves special effects for that reason. But the actual story itself, I think I really loved it. Now, biopics normally piss me off. I normally hate biopics, but there's something about this one that felt kind of real, kind of gritty, and I think it's because Robbie Williams was just, behind the filmmaking too. He was involved. I think that had a very positive effect, because there's times where Robbie is like kind of despicable and you kind of hate him. And there was something about that final scene where he makes up with his father that I found like really touching. And the fact is, his father wasn't like some evil bastard exploiting his son. It was just like, in a way, he kind of wanted to be what his son was, and he kind of believed in himself a little. He had a little bit of too big of an ego. And the way that they make up at the end, I think, was really beautiful. And honestly, if you haven't seen this film, I highly recommend it. I think it's definitely a unique experience for sure, but I kind of liked it. I really did like it. There are problems with it, don't get me wrong, but overall, better man, pretty good. Nosferatu. Now, I really loved The Lighthouse, Robert Eggers' other film. I thought that was an excellent film. It's probably in my top 50 films of all time. And The Northman I thought was pretty good, although definitely flawed, a bit more flawed. And what was the other one? The Witch, I think. The Witch was pretty good too. I think The Lighthouse is his best film. This one though, Nosferatu, it wasn't for me. It really wasn't. And again, it might be because I went in there with high expectations. Maybe that's something to do with it, but I didn't jam with it that well, and it might have something to do with my horror of having to watch Nosferatu during like a film studies lecture where I watched the original Nosferatu and how fucking painstakingly boring that was, and then I had to like do like an analysis on it and shit like that, and maybe all that has like part to do with my ranking of Nosferatu. Maybe that is part of the reason I've got like a PTSD from this goddamn vampire, this goddamn Dracula ripoff. He's caused me this pain, so I just don't like anything associated with him. Now, I just want to say everything about this film, the cinematography in this film is fucking amazing. Some of the acting is like stellar. I really love how they present Nosferatu, like kind of keeping him in the shadows at first, and some of the sort of twists and turns in the film, although you know a lot of them if you know the story of Nosferatu or just Dracula, were really good and really well presented. And yeah, everything about this film, the horror aspect of it was great too. It just wasn't for me, but I think I'm giving it a fair enough shake, right, for a film I didn't enjoy and I found a little bit of a chore to get through. Could have been shorter, in my opinion, as well. But look, I'll give it high praise. If you love this film, if it's in your top 5, I get it. I understand. Because it's like The Lighthouse. I really loved The Lighthouse a couple of years ago, but a lot of people found it boring and pretentious and they didn't like it. And I can kind of understand that view. And I kind of feel the same way here. So if you really love this film and you rank it really high, I totally get it. It is just a matter of taste, right? And yeah, it's not for me. But some of his other films I definitely love. So I don't have any lost thoughts for this director. I think he's brilliant. And I can't wait to see his next project that's not Nosferatu, is all I can say. So there you have it, Nosferatu. Anora. So I remember before I watched this film, I read a brief description. It was like, a stripper gets married or falls in love with like this Russian oligarch's son or like this Russian businessman's son. And I was like, okay, what the hell is this about? And I watched it and I fucking love the first half. I think the energy in it is brilliant. The acting is pretty good overall too. And it's really funny, and it's a very raunchy film too, don't get me wrong, but everything about it was pretty good, the first half anyway. And then we get to the point where like everything starts to fall apart in the film, and that particular scene where they're trying to like hold Annie like captive, that scene it draws out, and it's hilarious, like, especially when she like screams the R word. The R-A-P-E word, right? And the guys are like, whoa, why is she saying that? Why is she saying that? Like, that was fucking hilarious, that scene. And, but also quite, like, traumatizing too. And then I think it was that scene onwards, everything after that scene felt very dragging. And the film's, like, second half especially, just kind of felt like it was meandering around a little bit too much and didn't have, like, a clear story beat, I guess. Like, there's something about it. It was just, it felt like we were meandering too much, and the plot kind of went in a weird way. And I guess like you hope that they stay together, but then like the true colors are seen. But then I don't know, there's something about it. It didn't feel very fulfilling, and like the ending scene especially felt, I don't know, a bit weird, and not like where I wanted them to take that character. But definitely some really funny moments. I really like the first half of this film, especially. Just the second half for me let it down. So there you are, Anora. Wallace and Gromit, a vengeance, or vengeance most foul, I should say. There is no ah. Yeah, anything done by Aardman Animation is always going to be high praise. I think what they do is great. Stop motion animation, I'm glad that they are keeping it alive, because I definitely think it's a unique form of art. And yeah, I loved it. I think all the animation of this film was excellent, and it would be in the top 10 if it wasn't just for the story. Now, the story is fine. I don't think it's like bad. I like it. it is just like they have this little robot, the Norbert, and he of course turns evil and creates more ones, and they kind of get framed for like some burglary, and then they have this one cop who's like trying her best to prove, or she knows in her gut that they're innocent. And that was my problem, really, is the story did feel a little bit surface level, like we could have done a bit more. And it was fine, I didn't hate it, but yeah, just not, I don't know, I just want to see more, maybe something a bit unique, something a bit more edgy. And it felt like similar beats we've gone through over Wallace and Gromit before, where like Wallace needs to, see that Gromit does have feelings, I guess. Like, I think we've done this before. It feels a little repetitive to other stories they've done in the past. So that's my main issue. All the animation in it is brilliant. It's literally just the story. So there you have it. Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul. Alien Romulus. Now, I did go into this with fairly low expectations as well, so maybe that's had a part of it too. I just love this film for the atmosphere. I think the horror in it was pretty good too, and yeah, that's pretty much it, really. That's all I came here for. I came here for a good sort of horror flick, and I think we got one. Now, the story I couldn't give two fucks about, really. The whole robot guy with his sister, I don't really care about any of that. I just came here for the horror, and I liked it. So, there you have it. I've got not much more to say. I thought it was just a well done film. Body horror, check. Actual horror, check. Aliens, check. It wasn't convoluted. It wasn't too convoluted. The story was very simple, very bare bones. But I didn't really come here for a complex story. I came here for a suspenseful experience, and I felt like I got that for the most part. Although I do think like there are moments where I wish the body horror was a little bit more explicit. Okay, I wish it was a bit more violent. But I liked it overall. I thought it was good. So there you are, Alien Romulus. Soundtrack to A Coup d'etat. Now, this is a film that basically centres over the Congo's sort of fight for independence from Belgium, and then obviously its later sort of protests of Belgium's shenanigans within the Congo's country, and how they crippled the Congo from the jump, right? They didn't really give them full independence, even though they promised to. And then obviously also the execution, or the murder of Patrice Lumumba. Patrice Lumumba, I think that's how you say it. Oh, whatever. The protest over his death and stuff like that too. Now, this movie is littered with music. Throughout the entire film, it feels like almost like a messy jazz track where we have all this like different music littered throughout, and I use littered in a positive spin on it. And all these different artists who were involved in like the fight for independence and the protesting of obviously the murder of Patrice and all that. And I think that works because it kind of, in a sense, is like the spirit of jazz. It feels very messy, but it kind of works at the same time. My only problem with this film is it's far too long. It needed to be like 40 minutes less. This is like a long documentary for a documentary already. It really should have had some time cut. But that's my only real problem. Aside from that, I really enjoyed it, and it was a subject that I knew literally nothing about. And whenever you teach me something new, so a part of history I don't know, and you do it in an interesting and fun way, I think that is like a big thumbs up for any documentary that can do that. So that's why I put it here. It's sort of fairly middle of the list, but I think that's fair. That's a soundtrack to A Coup d'etat. Sugarcane. So this is a documentary that essentially follows the residential schools that were done in Canada against the Native American and Inuit populations. Now, this is a hard watch. I really did enjoy it, and it felt very personal to follow these different people who were obviously all affected by the residential schools in different ways. Now, it truly was a massive evil that was done to these people, and these residential schools were abhorrent. And obviously a lot of these people who were affected by it, they're still alive today. A lot of people who were affected by it. I think the last one was closed in 97, I believe. So it's not even like it's in a distant history. It's fairly relevant. And we follow these different people. A lot of them are fairly older, obviously, and they're different yeah, they're different experiences, and there's some crazy revelations made. I believe one of the people we follow figures out that he actually was a baby left in a, like, left to be burnt, like basically left to be discarded. I think he was left in like the incinerator, and he was found by like, the milkman or something. Like, some crazy revelations, and the Catholic Church, of course, was involved in this. And I think that my favourite sort of person that we follow is the one guy who obviously discovers through a DNA test that he's actually the son, I believe, of the priest who ran the residential school that his mother went to. In other words, the priest, of course, abused his mother, and that's how he was born. And I think he is my favourite sort of person we follow for numerous reasons, but one of them is he's so somber. You know, he's not really angry. He kind of, his anger is sort of, he keeps it contained, but if I was him, I'd be fucking livid. I would be, you know, crying out to the heavens. And yeah, this guy was especially an interesting figure to follow. Yeah, really heart-wrenching, really upsetting at times, and I think a fairly good documentary, and I think it didn't feel its runtime whatsoever, too, which is good. The only thing I didn't like was the bullfighting. I found bullfighting abhorrent, but aside from that, it's pretty good. So, there you are, Sugarcane. Nickel Boys. Now, I liked a lot about this film. I thought the story was excellent. What I hate about this film is the POV gimmick. I thought that really ruined the film in a lot of ways. I think at times it definitely works, but there's other times where it just feels far too wonky, and I think it just pulls me right out of the narrative. I don't feel like I'm there. I feel like I am watching a POV gimmick, and that was my biggest complaint. Now, which is a real shame, because I thought this story is kind of similar to the one we just talked about. This obviously was about these kids who were sent to this school, this almost like this residential school, I guess it kind of was, right, where they try to, of course, re-educate people, essentially. And, of course, one of the characters at the end is killed. And it also sort of flips between modern day and the past, too, where we see one of the characters older, but, of course, there's a few twists here and there. Yeah, I mean, I love the story. I thought it was excellent, and I think it was just ruined by the POV gimmick. Now, at times, like I said, I think it really worked well, but at other times, it felt far too wonky, and I wonder if it would have just been better if they just ditched the gimmick. Please. But aside from that, I loved a lot of things about this film, so there you have it, Nickel Boys. A Complete Unknown. I don't know what it is about this film, but there was something that I just really liked about it. It didn't feel like its runtime. I think Timothée Chalamet did an excellent job playing Bob Dylan. I know I complained about biopic films before, but I don't really know much about Bob Dylan as a person, so maybe that had a part of it. But this felt like a good biopic film, although at times it felt like a little cameo-y. Like, it was like, look, here's Johnny Cash. Look, here's this guy, here's that guy. Like, that was a bit annoying at times. And there's another film that does this too, which is a bit higher up on the list, and I've been a bit more generous to, but that was kind of annoying. But yeah, I don't know, the story was pretty good. Like I said, it went by really quickly, and I enjoyed most of it. I think Timothée Chalamet's performance was very somber, very nuanced, but you could see through like the cracks. I think all the relationship drama was really well presented too, and you know, he's a real scumbag at times, and I think this film's shot really great too, and I like the message of like the fact that he betrays the genre that he welcomed him and like basically gave him his career, and you know the results of that and how it really hurt his pride just to give the fans what they want, you know, and so maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's because it didn't feel like we were doing a jerk-off session. We were just jerking off Bob Dylan and how great he is. It felt like we were actually examining him as a flawed character at times, and that's what I liked about it. I don't know, part of it doesn't feel right, it being this high, and maybe it should be lower, but that's what I'm going with. So there you have it, A Complete Unknown. Gladiator 2, my most controversial one probably on this list, because it's probably higher than it should be, but listen, I lost hope in Ridley Scott after Napoleon. That was dreadful. But there was something about this film when I watched it. Maybe it was my low expectations, but I enjoyed it. Now, does it follow similar beats to the first film? Of course. Does it feel a little cliche at times? Of course. But I still liked it nonetheless. I thought the action was brilliant. I think the story was simple and easy to follow. I do feel like the third act was a bit piss poor, but everything else was excellent, and I really liked it. So, there you have it. I know it's not the most popular opinion. I know a lot of people shit on this film, but I didn't really think much of it. I didn't think of it as like this high piece of art. That's not how I kind of went into the film, and maybe that's part of the reason why this has affected my ranking, but I think a lot of love did go into it, regardless, and I enjoyed it. So, screw you. It's going here. Gladiator 2. Memoir of a Snail. I went into this with no expectations, really, because I had no idea what it was about, and I really fucking enjoyed the story. I thought it was brutal at times. It was brutally honest at times. That's what it felt like. It was, it's about this girl who loses her parents and then kind of goes through the foster system and ends up with various different parents, and then we also follow her brother too, and kind of his journey as well through the foster system. Obviously, they're not together, they are separated. And there's lots of like colourful characters in this. The animation, like sort of stop motion animation, I think was excellent too. The humour was dark, but had that very Australian tint to it. And I loved everything about it. I thought it was just really wholesome. And that's why I'm putting it this high. Got not really much more to say about it. I think this is one that most people probably haven't watched, so I recommend you do watch it. So that's it. Memoir of a Snail. The Wild Robot. So I was debating whether Memoir of the Snail or The Wild Robot should get the highest in the rating, but I'm going to give the edge to The Wild Robot, although I did really like Memoir of the Snail. I think they're on like a similar path. Now, something about The Wild Robot, this feels like what Pixar should do. Now, is the story a little cliche, could have been hammered out a bit better at parts in this film? Maybe, but I think for the most part, the story was very good. I really loved the animation. It's not what I expected. I went in here knowing it's about some robot that washes on an uninhabitable land, and she, of course, has this little bird that she cares for after killing the rest of his siblings, which is pretty dark. So we instantly go into some, more adult themes here. But yeah, it's about like motherhood. This robot raising this little bird. I think it's a goose, right? And then, of course, the goose needs to fly off when the migration happens, and training him for that. And then that's where the film's sort of midpoint is. And then it kind of gets, it goes into a different direction where the robot is getting captured now by its robot people. I liked it. I really loved this film. I thought it was really well animated. It was a pretty good story, and this is what Pixar should be doing. But of course, this was DreamWorks instead. But yeah. So, it's my favourite of the animations. I don't know. I see a lot of people love this one too. Some people are a bit critical, but yeah, I don't know. I didn't see much fault with it. I thought it was pretty good. So, there it is. The Wild Robot. Black Box Diaries. So, this is a documentary with a pretty heavy theme, of course. It's about this woman who is in Japan. She's a journalist, and she's trying to fight for justice for this. I think he's like another journalist, or he's like a businessman who abused her. Now I'm using the word abuse, but there's a better word to describe what happened, but obviously monetization and all that crap, so I can't use it. But yeah, the R word, okay? And she goes to try and fight her justice. I mean, that's what the film is. It's presented pretty well. I think at times, I don't know, some of the choices, I guess, of how they edited it felt a little like, I don't know, could have been a bit more streamlined, but that's like the most criticism I have. It really just comes down to I preferred a lot of the other films above this one, but definitely a sympathetic film. I feel everything for this woman, and, it's fucking terrible that people do that, and it's terrible that Japan's justice system is obviously not built to really fight against that particular crime, or, a lot of hatred towards this victim. She's kind of blamed for it, like it was her fault, like she could have prevented it, like she should have done it, like she's in the wrong basically, and not him, where, dreadful. But yeah, I I think this is a fair place for it. I really did enjoy it though, so yeah. Box Diaries. September 5. So this film, of course, follows the ABC control room at the 1970-something Olympics in Munich, Germany, and of course, during their broadcasting, the hostage situation happens, where of course a bunch of Israeli athletes and coaches are taken hostage by I guess Islamist terrorists, right? And I think it was the first time they used the word terrorist. Now, I knew very little about this subject going in. It's like one of those things I feel like we should have learned about, but we didn't, which is a bit odd. And we, of course, are following the ABC control room and their kind of view on this tale. Now, the ending, the last like 20-30 minutes of this film are absolutely brutal. And if you didn't know anything about this historical event, it must be a big twist as well, because Jesus Christ. And I think it's a fairly good warning against, a fairly good warning in favor of good journalism, right? If you're a journalist, you don't just report shit that you hear. You have to verify stuff as well. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a good message there. But I also, like, the film's really tense. I really like that. But I also think it's interesting, too, as, like, a historical time capsule type of thing, just to learn how these things happened, like, how they broadcast the Olympics. I mean, I found all that really interesting about the film, too. Some really funny moments at times, tragic moments at times, really well acted, too. I think maybe the direction, I was like, well, who's the main character? Whose story is this? That felt a little bit flimsy at the start, but it's like a minor thing, really. It's a nitpick. I mean, overall, I really enjoyed this film. So there you have it. September 5. Dune Part 2. So I found the first Dune a bit of a slog. Wasn't really my type of thing. I felt like it did feel like too much of a setup film, and I wasn't too big on Dune 1, but Dune Part 2 I think has definitely improved my opinion on Dune. Now, I'm not a huge sci-fi guy, I'm not a Dune fan, I know a lot of people are, so I think I've been more than fair with giving this film the number 11 spot. So yeah, everything about this film from a technical standpoint is excellent. I think the music, the soundtrack is great, the visuals are amazing, although some of the nighttime scenes do, I'm like squinting. I'm like, do we have to do this at night, please? But that's like a small nitpick, really. I think the acting was fairly well done too. Yeah, I mean, I've got nothing but praises really for this film. I loved it a lot more than the first one. And it definitely makes me more interested in the third film going forward. This was one of the last films I watched because I was dreading it, because I didn't enjoy the first one very much, and I did find it a chore. But this one didn't, and maybe that's why it's so high, is because I went in with low expectations. I mean, that's always something that you have to account for, but I mean, I loved everything. I think everything everyone loved about the first one, and all the praise the first one got, I see it now. I understand now. But I only kind of got that through the second film. But yeah, it was great. I really loved it. I love the character arcs too. I think the characters just felt a lot more real to me as well. Like from a character standpoint, I really loved it. And I'm not a huge sci-fi guy, but this one really brought me in. So Dune 2, number 11. Now we get in to the top 10. Ooh, Seed of the Sacred Fig. Now this is a film that I think is a German film, but obviously it's set in Iran. And I was reading like the context behind how this was filmed. It's pretty amazing that a lot of this film was like filmed in secret in Iran. That's kind of wild. Now basically this takes place during the protests in Iran, obviously for female rights, and we follow specifically this family, and the father is a prosecutor in the regime, and his daughters are somewhat rebellious, right? And the mother is quite conforming to her husband's rule, and it does take a bit to get into the main conflict, and maybe that has hampered it, but everything else about this film is great. Even though it is a very long film, it doesn't feel it. It is almost 3 hours long, but I generally didn't feel the runtime that much. Aside from like at the start, and obviously the main conflict is basically the dad has this gun, and the gun goes missing. Now, the consequences of that is he could be imprisoned, and also he will lose all of his reputation. and it basically follows the events that transpire after losing the gun, and how the father basically has no faith and no trust in his family. And the last like half hour of this film devolve into like a pure, almost like suspenseful horror film, and that's what I love. That is my favorite part of this film, is where it all leads to, and I fucking love it. And I don't think you can really have that without the build-up, and the build-up definitely isn't bad, so that's why this film has to be number 10 for me. I found it really compelling. I adored the story, and especially some of the cinematography. I do think like the smartphone footage getting spliced in tore me a little bit out of it, but it's a minor, like, small critique. Honestly, loved this film. Almost like a 10, maybe like an 8 or a 9 out of 10. It was great. These next films are all excellent, and I think this one is a great way to start the top 10 off. So that's it. Seed of a Sacred Fig. No Other Land. This was a powerful documentary, and probably my favourite documentary of the bunch. And I do feel kind of bad, because I think last year it was 20 Days in Mariupol, and it feels like I'm drawn to the sort of suffering, like the suffering porn, you know, like, we've got to see some people suffering to have a good documentary. And I don't mean to do that, but it does make the documentary a lot more powerful, and I think this one especially. Now, I know like a little bit about the West Bank displacement, but I never knew how bad it was, and I think this documentary really highlights how inhumane and evil I think the Israeli government treats the West Bank settlers. Now, reading into it, or not settlers, sorry, the West Bank occupants. Of course, the settlers are the ones who come in and steal their land. Now, whatever you think of Gaza and Hamas and that situation is one thing, but let's just look at the West Bank situation. I think that, how can you be in favour of what the Israeli government does? And I think that's what this documentary highlights. Now, yes, there is no good and evil on both, there's good and evil on both sides, sure, but what the Israeli government does here, and the what we see them do through the video, how they stand there, the IDF stand there as, these settlers come in and just terrorize the residents of the West Bank, and how building permits are just not permitted, and they literally tear down a school in front of children, a school that's been there for decades, that what didn't go through the building permits, but when you don't allow them to build a school, like the fact that there is no school there, and these people have been living there for hundreds of years, and you don't allow them to build a school there, and then 20 years or whatever, however long it was, after the school's been built, you tear it down in front of them. I mean, how can you not see that as anything other than evil? And I think that's an important message, I think, that this film portrays. And I think the two figures, obviously you have the one guy who's Israeli and then the other guy who's Palestinian. Both of them are like presented really well too. And honestly, I love this documentary. I thought it was powerful, educational, everything a documentary should be, and I loved it. So I give it a big thumbs up. My favorite documentary of the bunch. There you have it. No Other Land. Conclave. Now, something about this film, very somber, very beautifully shot. The characters, I think, are all well performed, and the different, allegiances are well established. There's something about the institution of the Vatican I find very interesting. I just think it's this really weird, almost supernatural organization of organized religion. And I think there was a show a while ago called The Young Pope, which I really loved. And this is kind of similar in a lot of ways, where we just really examine the people who inhabit said institution. And obviously, basically the plot of this film takes place after the death of the Pope, and of course, after a Pope dies, all the cardinals have to elect a new Pope, and it's that process of electing a new Pope, but then also finding all the candidates and their various different, problems. And is it Ralph Fiennes is the lead, and I think he's excellent. There's very quiet sniffs in this film. There's a lot of sniffs, and I think that in a way was a good thing, because it had this almost like ASMR feel to it. Didn't feel its runtime. Really enjoyed the little twist at the end, and I thought definitely made me do a lot of thinking, so I liked it. I thought this was a great film. So overall, I give it a big thumbs up. Conclave, really enjoyed it. The Girl with the Needle. Dude, this film was wild. So essentially, you follow this woman. She's waiting for her husband to return from the war. And of course, he doesn't. So she decides to, assuming that he's dead, she decides to start a relationship with her boss. And then her husband comes back, but he's all disfigured. The body horror was a weird theme this Oscar season. And of course, sort of leaving her husband, she goes with this rich guy, but obviously that doesn't turn out so well. So eventually she befriends this woman who obviously gives her baby a new home, seemingly, and then she begins working for this woman to give other babies new homes. And that's the story. I won't ruin anything else about it because I think you should watch it and all the twists and the turns. And Jesus Christ, this is a wild film, and honestly, I loved every aspect of it. I think the black and white worked really well. The cinematography in this film is often beautiful. The characters are all well defined, and yeah, there's a lot to think about. This film makes you think about a lot. And I mean, I loved it. I went in this film not knowing a single thing about it, and I exited knowing a lot about it. And it's in my top 10. Made it into my top 10. Something about the foreign films. The foreign films always have some good ass shit there. And yeah, this was no exception. This was excellent. So there you are. The Girl with the Needle. A Different Man. Oh, God, I love this film too, and it's kind of got similar themes to the last film, especially in relation to the sort of body dysmorphia. I don't want to. I say body horror, but you understand what I mean. I don't mean it as like a bad thing, like as in, society views this as horrific type of thing. And of course, you follow. This is Sebastian Stan, and he basically plays this character who's got this face disfigurement, and he basically gets the opportunity to remove this disfigurement and live life, appearing to society as normal or typical, whatever you want to use. And so he goes through that procedure, but of course this flatmate that was this playwright who's writing a play about him, believes he's dead, so writes this play. He goes to audition and he gets the part via wearing a mask of his old face. And then eventually this other guy, played by Adam Pearson, comes up, and he begins to steal his life. And Adam Pearson, of course, in real life actually has this condition. And I thought it was excellent in the way that in its message, right? Now, at first I was thinking, that's kind of weird. Why are we casting Sebastian Stan to have someone with this condition when he doesn't in real life? But then I understand it when you obviously watch the film, because, it makes sense. And actually casting someone, Adam Pearson, who has this condition was, I think, the right thing to do, essentially, the really right thing to do. Now, Adam Pearson, I think, at times does feel a little wonky. Some of his performance does feel a little but other times he's really good. And I think overall it was a great film, especially the climax and the sort of resolution. The last 30-40 minutes of the film were brilliant, and I like it's almost like a psychological horror in a lot of ways too. All of that was great. All the characters were really well done, especially like I forget her name now, but the flatmate character, the playwright girl, the way that she kind of comes across so innocent and so lovely, and then when we get to know her, we realize that she's actually really cynical and really weird, and she's kind of fetishizes it as well. Like, not a great person, it turns out, but she seems so great at first, and the way that we learn that and we peel back the layers. Oh God, everything about this film, I really recommend it. If you haven't seen it already, I really enjoyed it. It's an A24 film as well, so, A24 has been a little wonky so far this year, but this one, they definitely didn't disappoint, and I loved every minute of it, so I recommend it highly. A Different Man. Now, my top 5 was really, really hard to exactly rank. I've tried my goddamn best. I mean, to be honest, my top 10 was hard to rank, but the top 5 especially, there is no clear winner for me. Last year, it was very easy who was number 1, which film was number 1. This year, I'm unsure, really. It's a toss-up between the top 5, so just keep that in mind as we go through what I've decided is my final ranking. It's not perfect, I will say that, and I'm not entirely happy with it, but I gotta go with something, so here we are. Number 5 is I'm Still Here. This is a Brazilian film, I believe, or it's set in Brazil. And of course, it basically follows this family after the father is kidnapped by the regime, by the government, for being a supposed communist collaborator or whatever you want it, whatever it is the reason. And basically it's the family. It's based on a true story, of course, and how they deal with it, especially the mother character. She's the sort of main one. Now, I found this film really compelling at times, shot pretty well for the most part. Just a really interesting story. I mean, I've got no real complaints. I think it was the right runtime. I don't think they went over. I think the little flash forwards they do, where we go a few years ahead, where they get the death certificate, and then we flash back even more when we see, of course, the main lady, the main protagonist, as she's all old and grey and about to die. And of course, I mean, it's really good. I enjoyed every minute of it. I thought it was very somber, very compelling, very interesting. A story I didn't know about, and I mean, not really much more to say. I just really enjoyed it. So it's number 5. I feel like this one I'm fairly secure on. I don't think it stood out as much as the other 4. So there you have it. I'm still here. The Apprentice. I've probably put this way too high. I'm probably giving it too much credit. Maybe it's because of my Trump derangement syndrome as to why I've put this so high. But there was something about this film that really captured the spirit, I feel, of Wolf of Wall Street. Now, Wolf of Wall Street is my favourite film. One of my favourite films anyway. It's in my top 10 films of all times. I fucking love that movie. And I think in a way this kind of felt similar. It's like the closest film I can compare it to. Where, you're watching this person who is generally kind of terrible, but there's still like a human being underneath, the shell that they, do give to the world. And there was times in this film where I felt sympathetic for Trump, which, I mean, I feel like that's an achievement in itself. Now, talking about this type of film, it's unavoidable that I'm gonna have to talk about politics, because of obviously the guy who the film is about is the fucking president of the United States at the moment, which is wild. So, yes, this is based on the brave insurrectionist, Donald Trump, and his rise to power, I guess, his rise to being a businessman in New York. Obviously, this is whilst his father is still alive. And, of course, his relationship with the lawyer, Roy Cohn. And I think the parallel of these two men and the way that, Donald Trump as a person begins to break down, and how he begins to be corrupted by Roy Cohn, but how ultimately that bites Roy Cohn right on the ass. I think, it's a fucking brilliant film. I really loved it. Now, there was parts of this film that almost felt like Marvel fucking cameos, where it's like, oh my god, here's Roger Stone. Oh my god, here's Andy Warhol. It felt like a little bit almost like we're doing fucking MCU cameos. And I think that I didn't like that aspect of the film, but I think the way it was shot, the way it kind of feels like the 80s, there was something about like the grittiness of it I really fucking enjoyed too. Man, I like this film a lot. What can I say? I think it's a deep portrayal of Trump as a person, and I don't think it's entirely, I mean, yeah, sure, it's biased against him. Of course it is. But I think at the same time, it's not entirely biased against him. There's parts of this film where you feel sorry for him, where you understand him, where it really tries to get you to see how he became the man he became. And yeah, I mean, I think I liked all that. And of course, the most controversial scene was obviously the scene where he assaults his first wife. And yes, I don't think, obviously, neither. People had a lot of issues with this, but I'm pretty sure in the divorce documents it was referenced that this happened. I think, what was it? Ivana Trump literally said, I think in the divorce documents, that Trump did that to her on several occasions, I believe. So, I mean, is it really untrue? If you are doing all this defending for a man that doesn't give a fuck about you, maybe that says more about you than it does me. But there we have it. I tried to be as little as political as possible, but obviously I'm going to have to be somewhat. But there you have it, The Apprentice. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see it a million more times. It has a Wolf of Wall Street vibe, and yeah, I mean, what can I say? I did like it, although my small complaint was the MCU cameos. That did feel a little jarring. The Brutalist. Now, I just want to say, I withdraw that previous statement. I think 5 and 4 are fairly solid. I'd probably switch them around. But these top 3 are the ones that, like, really... honestly, it's really hard. These top 3 films, I think, are all excellent. None of them massively stand out amongst each other, so these ones are hard. But for now, I'm putting The Brutalist as number 3. This film was 3 hours and something long, and it had a built-in intermission in the cinema. It was kind of crazy. I don't think I've ever watched a film with a built-in intermission. And to be honest, I did not feel the runtime whatsoever. This film was gripping from start to finish. I think the acting was all excellent. The cinematography in this film was gorgeous. The sound in this film was amazing. The plot turns, the turns in the plot. That one scene that happens, we'll just say, the one scene that happens with the main guy and the big boss man, when they're on their little holiday, they're on their little vacation, looking in Italy. Something happens after the main guy's a bit drunk, okay? That scene was fucking terrifying, and it came out of nowhere, but then when I thought about it, it kind of makes total sense, right? So it didn't, it came out of nowhere, sure, but it was surprising, but it wasn't like a bad surprise, and it made total sense, and Jesus Christ. The one scene, especially with the wife character, I'm forgetting all the names of the characters, I do apologize, but when the wife bursts in the house and gives that speech, fuck me, that was a powerful scene. This entire film was excellent from start to finish. Did not feel the runtime whatsoever. That was an amazing feat in itself. The fact that you could have something so long that felt like it was an hour, right? Because I was just so gripped and I was so hooked and I was so into it. And I adore this film. If this film gets Best Picture, which I'm pretty sure it will, and we'll get onto that in a bit when I'm talking about all the different nominees and what I think will get what, I will not be mad if this gets Best Picture, basically. I'd be satisfied. Although, there are 2 films that I personally, at the moment anyway, in my opinion at the moment, would put above The Brutalist. And let's get on to them with number 2. But anyway, this was The Brutalist. Sing Sing. So I recently rewatched this. I first watched this film ages ago when it had like an exclusive showing in the cinema because I'm a huge fan of Coleman Domingo. I think he's excellent. Obviously, this is a Walking Dead channel, so you of course know I love my Coleman Domingo. So anything Coleman Domingo is in, I will instantly watch. And I saw this film being advertised, and it looked really good. And I went in there thinking, I'm just here for his great performance, as I know he'll do. And yes, he is excellent in this film. Very somber, but nuanced performance for sure. He has bursts of outrage, bursts of sadness. There's so much range to his performance. So I really feel like Coleman Domingo would deserve this Oscar. If he got it, I would be ecstatic. I'd be so happy for him. But on top of that, this film is just so relaxing, such a really humble story to go through. It's of course set in a prison in Sing Sing Correctional Facility in New York State, I believe, and essentially you're following 2 characters mainly, Divine G, who of course is played by Coleman Domingo, and wait, no, I don't think that is Divine G. I think the other one's Divine G. I'm getting them mixed up. See, I'm terrible with character names. But basically, it's Coleman Domingo's character, and then the other guy, and I think the other guy is played by, the real-life person that this is based on. And they basically have, a bunch of the real-life prisoners, because this is entirely, this is based on a true story. Most of this is actually, real, it actually happened. And, a lot of the prisoners basically reprise their roles of who they actually were, which is insane, because I didn't really get that until the credits. I was like, oh shit, Ray, what? Because I didn't really look into it too heavily before the film. And I think their performances are really excellent. They feel like professional actors, but they're playing themselves, playing characters. So there's an extra level there. And they're all amateur actors, I guess. And I think they do an excellent job. And maybe that's the credit to them, or maybe that's the credit to the director of this too. Everything about this story, it's a prison film without any of the cliches of prisons film. It's a completely unique prison film. There is no violence, there is no homophobia, there is no, crazy prison escapes. It's just people, real people, and how they deal with their incarceration. And by they channel their sort of emotions through drama. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think the character arc that Colman Domingo's character goes on, and the character arc with the other main character, I think that one's divine. I don't even know. The other guy, anyway, the other dude, the more macho, more the knucklehead guy, essentially. And, you have these two different people. One very sophisticated, educated, and this other guy who kind of comes across as a bit thick, right? But he's not. He's smart in his own way, and he actually is. Yeah, he's not dumb at all. And these two people come together. You have this ridiculous play that's being put on with all these stupid, like, we're having Freddy Krueger in there and time travel and all this shit. Man, I love this film. I could watch it again. The scene with Mike and this sort of Mike's what happens to Mike's character is, really fucking sad. I love this film. Honestly, it feels real because it is real, and it's beautifully shot as well. Everything about it is great. It's my number 2. I want this to win Best Picture so bad. More so than number 1, because I think number 1, like, you could see it coming. Whereas this one I don't think has a chance in hell, but I kind of would like to see it win at the same time. It's like one of those things, like, it would be really surprising, but I think it would be an excellent if it did. But I don't think it will, sadly. But anyway, I recommend this film if you haven't seen it already. Sing Sing. The Substance. So, like I said, you could really toss up my top 3. You could switch them around and I wouldn't have any problem. But I think for the moment, I'm going to put The Substance as number 1. It feels quite fitting because last year, obviously, Poor Things was my definitive number 1. And these two films, both The Substance and Poor Things, I guess in a sense have, like, weirdly things in common. The things they have in common is lots of nudity, a sort of a unique way, a unique sort of film with a feminist perspective, and I guess, like, fucking bonkers. I like the 3 things that this and Poor Things have in common. And maybe I just have a type of film. maybe I need my films to be fucking bonkers, have some tits, and also, what was the other one? Be a feminist film too, but a feminist film in a weird way. Yeah, and that's what this film is. It's basically about this woman. She's a former actress, former Hollywood, on the Walk of Fame, and she's recently... She does like a body, like body fitness, body show. And she's been very insecure with her aging body. And these random people come out of nowhere with this substance that basically transforms a body from her body, which is like a younger, more beautiful version of herself, or at least how society wants her to be. But the trick is, you can only stay as... You have to switch every 7 days, otherwise there will be consequences. There is a lot of body horror in this film, which I think was all fucking disgusting, but brilliant at the same time. I think the commentary, the one sort of critiques I've seen, because I like to read, like, negative reviews of films I really like, just to kind of see where people come from. The one sort of negative thing that people talk about is they feel like the commentary was very surface level. And I kind of do understand that, because it's nothing new. It's not saying anything new or unique. And I agree with that. But I think it's doing it in a very unique and interesting way. And that's where I sort of feel like this film is a step above that criticism. I wouldn't levy that criticism, because I think, sure, what it's saying is nothing unique. But I think how it's doing it is fun. And it's doing it in a way that... more audiences would be like, oh shit, this is really cool, this is gross, haha, this is great. And I think that's a good thing, right? When it has like a good commentary, but it's appealing to other people. And, I loved everything about it. I thought it was great from start to finish. The end, how it, like, the opening image and the ending image, I think is great, with the burger getting dropped on the star to the, what happens on the ending. I guess my only criticism is in one of the final scenes, everyone in the audience suddenly turns into, like, a crazy person. And I'm thinking, would they really turn that crazy that quickly, even though this is, like, an abomination? Would they really get that crazy that quickly? And anyone who watched the film knows what I'm talking about. I'm keeping it vague, because I do highly recommend this film. But there you have it. That is my number 1. That is my favourite film from all the films that were nominated for an Oscar, The Substance. So now we've got all the feature films out the way, let's rank the shorts from worst to best. We're already an hour and 10 minutes in, so it's kind of crazy. But let's get into it. Incident. So this is the bottom for me. There's a couple reasons why. Now, obviously, the subject matter is there's a black guy who was shot in America by police, and from what I saw and from how it's presented, and I'm not even beating around the bush. It was a pretty unjustified kill. We'll just say that they murdered him. Maybe not murder. I don't know. Whatever. Maybe murder. Maybe that is the right word. Let's not debate that at the moment. Let's talk about the film as an art piece. Okay. Listen, the film, the subject matter, is not of my concern, really. That's not why it's rated here. The reason why it's the bottom for me is entirely the editing and how they decided to present this film. The first thing that was fucking annoying is there is no, audio over you. It's text. You're just reading text. It's like a text overlay, so I'm reading a book. It's like I'm reading an article. This is meant to be an audio visually medium, right? But a bit of text is fine. It wasn't a big deal at first, but then they started editing all this different CCTV footage from 15 different angles, and there was I think at one time there was 6 CCTV angles all on the screen, all blaring fucking the various audio from them at the same time. I can't focus. How can I focus on that? What is the purpose of that? I feel like this film was edited horribly, really bad, and that's honestly the only reason why it's this low. The subject matter aside, the film was edited dreadfully, and I just can't in good faith put it any higher than the bottom. Instruments of a Beating Heart. People love this one. It was fucking boring. It's about some kids in China playing instruments, and the teacher's a big meanie basically, and the kid, there's this one girl who keeps auditioning for she keeps auditioning for roles, and then she gets a role, and then she's not very good because she's not practicing, and then the teacher kind of bullies her a little bit, and then she gets better, and that's the film. I just don't care. To me, it was kind of boring, not a very interesting subject, and that's all it really comes down to. But I feel like it was presented really nicely. I did like a lot of the cinematography. I did like how they captured it. But when the subject matter is not great for me, it's going to go here. But if you found it really interesting and really insightful and all that, and you put it higher, I understand. Just not for me. Yuck. Ugh. It's a cute little animation, but that's all it really is. It's essentially some kids kissing each other, or learning about kissing, and then they want to kiss each other, but they feel disgusted because they're cuties or whatever. I don't know what it was. The stakes of the film were very low, but it is just a short, cute little animation, so I don't want to rag on it too hard. Just wasn't really for me. But I do really like the animation. It was really cute, so I'll give it that. If you put it higher, fair dues. Again, I feel like the substance of this film wasn't as good as some of the ones that are above it, but definitely not a bad one. I quite enjoyed it. It's definitely way better. It's leagues above the other two, I'll say that. Wonder to Wonder. This was a fucking wacky, bizarre, mostly animated short film. I think it's a British one. Yeah, it's a British one where there's these weird little people who basically live inside the TV, but they're actually real. It was fucking bonkers. I did kind of love it, but I felt like there should have been more. The ending just felt oh, that's it. It felt a little too short. It could have had a bit more exploration there, I feel. But whatever. It was okay. I put it here. Wonder to Wonder. Anuja. Yeah, this is about sweatshops. I guess it's a sweatshop's bad. Yeah, sure. I don't know. Maybe it's my thing. It's one of these moral quandaries. If the short film was about, I don't know, murder being bad, I guess I would agree with it. I mean, I agree with the principles of it, I guess. I think it was okay. It's basically this girl, little girl, she wants to do a maths quiz. She's basically working at this sweatshop completely illegally in India. And, oh shit, it is India, not Sri Lanka, isn't it? I'm pretty sure it's India. And, yeah, her sister's there too. The ending I felt was a bit abrupt. They leave it on an ambiguous ending to what she did, which I guess fair enough, but it kind of I don't know, kind of feels weird. I don't like it when short films have ambiguous endings most of the time. Ambiguous endings are cool, but not in a short film. You haven't built up to it, so it's a minor thing. I don't care that much for the themes. I don't disagree that sweatshops are bad, but it just doesn't feel that profound to me. But I understand like the impact this film has had. Obviously they should, because they do this at the end of the film, they show it to kids and they so they can understand, and for that reason I totally hats off to this film. But as an art piece that I was that I was consuming, it just wasn't that great in my opinion. It was just fine. It wasn't bad, but it was just fine. The Last Ranger, similar thing. Is poaching bad? Poaching animals, is that bad? Obviously it's bad. Both of these films just feel like they have the message that everyone agrees with. I feel like 90% of people agree with, or 90% of people agree with, but they don't present it in an interesting new way. They present it in the obvious way, I feel. And I feel the same with this. Basically, and I know it's based on a true story, so I feel terrible, because actually, yeah, it is actually based on a true story, this one. Shit. But I stand by it. The film's quite cool. I think it starts off really nice. There's this little girl. Her dad makes these little figures, I think, but he also... Yeah, he works these little figures, and then she is friends with this this cop, this wildlife cop who protects the animals from being poached, and there's a dude there too, and basically this girl, the woman ends up dying whilst protecting the animals, protecting the rhino, and they actually use the real life footage of the rhino who's had his horn cut off. Maybe I was too harsh on this film. I actually did kind of like this one. I will say that. It was good. It was good. I did like it. Just not as much as the others. That's all it really comes down to. So, there you have it. The Only Girl in the Orchestra. I thought this would be like the worst one, but I actually thought it was quite good. It was presented really well. It was shot really well. If you found it boring as fuck, I could probably understand it and why you'd put it on the bottom of the list. I get it. But I just found it pretty interesting. It's about this woman who was a part of what was the first female to be basically accepted into a major orchestra, and we're going towards her retirement and the different classes, and it's like a little piece on her life, and she's like a very humble figure. And there's something about like when you have these like famous people who are very humble and they're not like narcissists, and they are just like normal people essentially. They're not weird freaks, they're just normal. And you have like a documentary. It's something about it. I find it quite interesting, and I feel like she was a very interesting figure. Yeah, that's all I have to say about it. Really, I just quite liked it. Lien. So this is a immigration film. Basically, there's a family. They're going to do their immigration checks or whatever it is, and then the dad essentially gets snatched up by ICE and deported, and they almost take the daughter, who's an American citizen. Obviously the mum intervenes. Now, I thought the film was excellently done. In a sense, it's almost like a horror film at parts, which I really loved, and I think it's contemporary. It's contemporarily relevant. Now, you might be saying like, well, yeah, most liberal woke people agree that deporting people is bad or whatever, but us cool conservatives, we need to get rid of them because they're not welcome here, or whatever it may be, or to drain our economy, whatever you want to say. But I feel like what this film really presents is the human story, right? These are people, these are real people, these are families you're destroying, and I think it's worthwhile. Now, obviously, I'm not going to go into my views on immigration. I don't think we should open the borders up to everyone, let me say that. But at the same time, I think we should make exceptions when, obviously, families are involved, when one half of the family is a US citizen, and obviously they're not just some sort of scam, it's a real family. They have children, for Christ's sake. We probably shouldn't break those families up. I think that's kind of evil. And I feel like that's what this film really does portray, and that's what I loved about it. So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's all I have to say. I think it was shot really well. Like I said, it does feel very suspenseful at parts too. So everything about it was great. That's Lien. Beautiful Man. So this is about 3 dudes who go into Turkey to get a hair transplant, and it's fucking hilarious. It's dark at times. It's very crude also. I don't really have much more to say about it. That's all I really have. I really loved it. I can't really explain the story too much because it is kind of a little bit all over the place, but it works really well, and it's just about exploring these 3 guys' relationships. Like, one of the big contentions is one of the dudes goes it turns out he's only booked for one surgery, so there's like a point where they think only one of them is going to get the hair transplant surgery. So yeah, great little animation, really recommend watching it. It is an adult themed one, alright, there's a lot of cocks in there, but yeah, I liked it. Death by Numbers. Now this is a documentary that follows the events after a school shooting, and we specifically follow this one girl who obviously was a victim of the shooting but survived, and basically how she channels her emotions and how she's dealt with everything. And then of course we kind of end with the court scene where she finally confronts the person who shot her. I thought it was a pretty powerful little documentary. I liked it pretty well. I think it was presented well and all that, so not really much more to say. That's where it goes. It's pretty good, but I just preferred the other ones above it. Magic Candies. I thought this was a really cute little animation, and I really love the premise and the concept. Basically, it's this kid gets a bunch of candies, and they each, every time he puts one in his mouth, they each give him a different ability. So one lets him, like, the couch speaks to him, and the others, the dog speaks to him, and there's some others as well, like, he can speak to his grandmother, or I think it was his grandmother, like, beyond the grave, too. Yeah, I just thought it was a really cool concept. It's a really cute animation, and I think it's animated pretty well, and yeah, that's it, really. I liked it. So, Magic Candies. The Man Who Could Not Remain Silent. So, this takes place in, I think it's Croatia, is it Kosovo? It's one of those places anyway. And essentially, it was during a troubled time where they were basically rounding up any Muslim and killing them. And there's this, you follow this one guy on the train who does remain silent. I guess he's like the main character. And there's another guy in his like car, in his little room, who speaks up, who's not a Muslim. He's like an ex-soldier, and he speaks up and he objects to what these brutes are doing, and he's taken off too. And that's pretty much the film. And I guess like I did really like it, and I think it's shot really well, and I like the story, you know, there's something I didn't know, and I think it's presented really well. But my only complaint is that it's so short that I feel like I can't put it any higher. It just didn't feel right putting it any higher, because it is just really, it's like 4 minutes long, and it's a powerful 4 minutes, I'll give it that. But that's all it comes down to. The Man Who Could Not Remain Silent. In the Shadow of the Cypress. So I think this is the best animation. I've got a live action, a documentary, and a animation in my top 3. So that's cool. And that wasn't by design. That was just because I think these 3 are particularly good. And this was my favourite animation. I think it's the best one out of the bunch. It's a sort of 2D... I think it's 2D animation, 3D animation, whatever it is. Animated film. It's basically about this soldier who has PTSD, and he has a very struggled relationship with his daughter. There is no dialogue in this film as well. It's entirely communicated through grunts and facial expressions and the animation itself, which I thought was very good, and it was well presented as well. And basically, there's a whale gets beached on the beach, and the daughter really wants to save it, whereas the father isn't having any of it until, of course, he has his little character arc. And I thought it was a really powerful, little, beautiful animation, and that's all I really have to say about it. I really recommend it, and I hope this is the one that wins, although I'm not sure if it will. We'll see. I'm Not a Robot. This is my number 2. I thought this was a hilarious, fun little live-action comedy, really. That's all it comes down to. It is about a woman who works in like an office, and she has the capture, you have to click all the little pictures to prove you're not a robot, and she keeps failing it, so she eventually comes to the realization she is a robot, and she contacts her boyfriend, and some wacky antics ensue. And I thought it was just fucking funny from start to finish. I was really entertained, and yeah, that's all it comes down to. I thought it was just hilarious. Not really much more to say. It's my number 2. I loved it. I'm Ready, Warden. Now, this is my favourite one, and I've seen some people rag on this, and they really don't like it, and I just don't get why. So if for any reason you're not a big fan of this, do let me know why, because I am interested to see a different perspective. I found this documentary very powerful in numerous ways. Essentially, we follow this guy on death row, and he does die, spoilers, but basically we also follow a few other people in his life. So first you have this godmother figure who's like his spiritual leader. You then also have the victim's son, his victim, and the actual guy on death row's son too. And you follow these people, and basically it's not like a miscarriage of justice or anything like that. This guy definitely did kill the person and then fled to Mexico for 5 years. So he's very guilty and he probably should be in jail for the rest of his life, but he shouldn't be killed. And that's what this documentary is, I guess, saying. And I completely agree. I feel like it's fruitless, it's pointless. What does killing him really achieve? Nothing. You just have more suffering, basically. You have his godmother who suffers, his son who suffers, and obviously even the victim's son doesn't get any catharsis or any justice, really. He's distraught by it, really. And he says something in the film, and my greatest sympathies to this guy. I mean, I can understand why he hates this man who murdered his father, but he says, like, well, this guy stole my childhood by killing my father, but I feel like in him advocating this guy's death, he's stealing, the murderer's son's childhood too. So, yeah, it's just like the cycle of violence. I think the death penalty is an archaic, medieval practice, and I feel like any country that does it is, no better than, like, well, I say no better, but it's just an archaic practice, and I feel like any country that still does it is pretty archaic, and America is no exception. America is the most progressive place in a lot of ways. It's the most advanced place in a lot of ways. But the fact it still has the death penalty in some states, I think, is ludicrous, and I think it's insane. It's just not how justice is. It's not justice. It's revenge. That's what it is. It's a misunderstanding of what justice should be or what justice is. It is purely and utterly revenge. And this documentary really moved me in a lot of ways, so it's my favourite of the bunch of shorts. My number one. I'm ready, Warden. Also, that's a cool ass word. So let's fire through these. Best Picture, who do I think will win it? I think it's probably going to go to The Brutalist. Who should win it? Probably The Substance, but I'm okay with The Brutalist. Best Director, who do I think it's going to go to? Probably The Brutalist again. Who do I think it should probably go to? I'm happy with The Brutalist. I think directed-wise, that was probably the best directed film. Best Actor, who do I think it's going to go to? I feel like it's definitely going to go to Adrian Brody. Who do I think it should go to? I personally want Coleman Domingo because of, just personal biased reasons. Best Actress, I generally, honestly feel like it's going to go to Carla Sofia Gascon. That's my honest opinion. Who do I think it should go to? Demi Moore in The Substance, for sure. We've got Best Supporting Actor. I think this one's probably going to go to Guy Pearce for The Brutalist. Who do I think it should go to? Probably him, yeah. I don't understand why Kieran Culkin is nominated. I don't really get... Yeah, whatever. Best Supporting Actress. I think this one is going to go to, in my personal opinion, I feel like it could go to Ariana Grande, but I think I'm going to give the edge to Zoe Saldana. I generally feel like they'll give it to her. Now, who do I think it should go to? I feel like Felicity Jones should get it. And if she does, I'll be very happy because she was excellent in that film. I think Best Original Screenplay should go to The Substance, but I think it might actually go to A Real Pain. And I wouldn't be terribly annoyed at that because I do feel like the screenplay for that film is pretty good. It really just comes down to the acting, which I didn't think really jammed well. Best Adapted Screenplay, what I think will win that? I'm hoping Sing Sing. I really am. And do you know what? I'm going to say Sing Sing. There we are. I'm going to say it's going to go to Sing Sing. That's my personal opinion. We'll see if I'm right. Best Animated Feature is definitely going to go to The Wild Robot, and I think it does deserve it, although I would like to see Wallace and Gromit win. And I think Wallace and Gromit does have a chance, but I think I'm going to give the edge to The Wild Robot. I feel like it's probably going to win it. And then Best International Feature Film, there's only one that was nominated for Best Picture. They do this every year, so it's pointless. Obviously, it's going to go to I'm Still Here, but I would like it to go to The Girl with a Needle personally, but I'm happy with I'm Still Here as well. I'm not offended by that. Best Documentary Feature, this one's kind of tough. I think it's probably going to go to Porcelain War. That's my personal bet, but I think it should go to No Other Land. Best Documentary Short Film, I feel like this one's tricky. I think it might go to Death by Numbers, but it should go to I'm Ready Warden. Best live action short film, I think it's definitely going to go to either The Man Who Could Not Remain Silent or a Leon. And I'm going to go with a Lien, however you say it. I think it's going to go to that one. The immigration one is going to get it. Which one do I think it should get? Obviously, I'm Not a Robot, but honestly, I wouldn't be too offended with any of them. I don't really care that much. Best animated short film, I think will go to... Oh, this one's tricky. I'm going to go with In the Shadow of the Cypress. I feel confident, okay? And that's what I want it to go with. Best original score, I think will go to... Oh, wait. This is a music one. This one's tricky. I'm going to go with The Brutalist. I feel like The Brutalist will sweep that, and I think The Brutalist probably does deserve it. Best original song, I have this horrible feeling it's going to go to one of the Emilia Perez songs, but honestly, I just don't care. I'd probably give it to the Elton John song, to be honest. That's just me. I mean, Like a Bird from Sing Sing, I guess, was okay as well, so I'd give it to one of them. Not Emilia Perez, but Emilia Perez is probably going to get it. Best sound, I think, is going to go to Dune Part Two, and which do I think will get it? Well, that's what it will get it. What do I think should get it? I couldn't really care. Probably Dune or The Wild Robot I'd be happy with. Best production design. That's going to go to Wicked, I think. And what do I think should probably get it? I could say Wicked, or maybe Nosferatu. Either or, but I think Wicked will get it. But I don't really mind too much. Now, best cinematography. I do care about this one. The fact that Emilia Perez is nominated is so sad. I think this one should either go to The Brutalist or Nosferatu, but I think the one that will get it is probably The Brutalist. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. Best makeup and hairstyling. There's a few there. I think this has to go to The Substance, personally, and I think it will. I'm going to say it will. I could see it going to Wicked, but I'm going to say it's going to go to The Substance, and that's good. Best costume design is definitely going to go to Gladiator 2. That's, I think, or maybe Wicked. Maybe Wicked at a second. It's Gladiator 2 or Wicked for sure. What do I think should get it? I'm going to say Gladiator 2 or Wicked. I don't really care. Either or, I'd be happy with. Maybe actually Nosferatu as well. Best film editing. I think this probably should go to The Brutalist. I would be happy with it going to Conclave. Why is Wicked nominated? I don't understand. What do I think will win it? I think The Brutalist will win that one. And then best visual effects. This one's tricky. I'm going to personally say Dune Part 2 should probably get it. And I think Dune Part 2 will get it. So there you go. There you have it. We've talked about every single award. We've talked about every single film. We've ranked them all. That's the video. I hope you have enjoyed. Stay tuned for the Oscar ceremony, I suppose, where I'll probably be totally and utterly wrong, and Emilia Perez will sweep every single award it was nominated for. Yeah, this season was okay. Wasn't a terrible Oscar season. There was some great films in there. There were some new films I saw, which I'm glad I did. There was some bad ones, but hey-ho, there always is. You can't expect everything to be great, I suppose. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Bye-bye. I'll see you next year when I do this again.